the damage and give you this form. Bring or mail this form to Town Center Chevroles. We'll order the parts, and when they arrive, we'll have a Chevrolet Oldsmobile for you to drive at no charge while we're repairing your car. We may meet by accident at Town Center Chevrolet Oldsmobile next to the Guilford Shopping Center in Surrey.
Good morning. The miners' strike, now in its 32nd week in the United Kingdom, has seen more mayhem, more violence, more riots than even the general strike of 1926. And it boils down to a question, I'm told now, of who runs Britain. Does the government run Britain, or do the striking miners under their Marxist leader Scargill, do they run Britain? Here's a small sample of what's been going on in the United Kingdom for the past 31, now 32nd week. Thousands of police on 12-hour duty all over the country. No clubs there.
We want to preserve our industry. We want to retain our jobs. Together, if we remain united, not only will we never be defeated, but in the process, we'll roll back the years of Thatcherism. We're going to win. Keep on. We can.
If a man comes to us and says, I want to get into my place of work there, we will get him in.
Our position is a very simple one. We have to adjust our business to the realities of what markets we have.
And here's old Ian getting beaten up as he comes out of the coal board offices. Just watch what happens. He's the elderly American import whom the miners' leaders hate. And here is Steve Shukla, a miner from Armthorpe in Yorkshire, on a tour of Canada to raise money and funds and sell the case for the Scargill strikers. We'll be interviewing Steve this morning. We're also going to talk to Bill Ritchie, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and later in the morning we're going to have a bash at the medical profession through David Schreck, Executive Director of the CU&C, who's very concerned about what he regards as overbilling by the medical profession on lifestyles, something which may affect your medical coverage one of these days. But first for Shukla from Armthorpe, NUM, after the break.
Everything's at stake for me. I'm 27 years old, right? I've got a wife, I've 2 kids. I'm fighting for their jobs for future, not just for my own. I'm 27. I don't want to be put on scrap heap at my age.
Those news clips from riots, and you can only call them that in the United Kingdom, some of them in Yorkshire, make penny farthing disputes look like a picnic. But here is Steve Shukla from Armthorpe in Yorkshire, who's been down the mines how many years?
9 years.
What's it like when you're faced by a couple of dozen galloping police horses?
Believe me, it's a terrifying experience. You would run like hell when you see those horses coming towards you.
But from where we sit, the use of force by the British police seems to be extraordinarily sane. Hundreds, if not thousands, of policemen merely pushing and not belting people with nightsticks and riot gear as they would do in this country.
Oh, but they do hit people with clubs, with riot shields. It's just that they don't show this kind of thing on the TV. It'd be bad press for the police.
Oh, come on, we showed it right now. We showed the police getting kicked and the police kicking other people right now.
Yeah, but that's pretty mild stuff. Believe me, from what I've seen on the picket lines, that's very mild stuff.
Are you suggesting to me the likes of the Daily Mirror or the People or the Sun or whatnot censor their coverage of the riots in Britain today?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. They do. There is a very biased opinion in the media. It's in favour of the government, of the Conservative government, and their use of brute force to try and break the miners' strike.
I've watched Scargill coming out of a conference in the ICFTU in Europe and being treated like royalty by ITN and the BBC when he was claiming that he had the support of Eastern Europe, which he didn't have at that time.
Again, biased reporting.
No, but it was in his favour.
Well, that's a very rare thing to be seen in Britain, and any slant towards the true nature of the dispute.
Tell me a little bit about yourself before we get down to cases. You're how old?
I'm 25 and I've worked in the mines for 9 years, since the age of 16.
All right, now what's your future as a miner right now? Is your miner one of the 20 mines and the 20,000 men arbitrarily closed by this elderly American?
No, my mine is not one directly threatened at this present moment in time. But I have joined the strike and I support the strike because I know that if the government gets away with its plans to attack our industry, gets away with its plans to decimate our union, then no miner's job is safe.
But who runs the country? Surely the way to tackle this is to throw Thatcher out if the IRA didn't get her.
Well, we're not presenting a challenge to the government. We're not trying to overthrow the elected government of Great Britain. All we are asking for is the right to work, the right to a future for ourselves and our families.
The right to decide what mines will be kept open.
No, we do not and never have opposed the closing of any mine other than on the grounds of exhaustion. That's okay. We're not asking for them to keep old exhausted mines open.
All right, now what about democracy in the NUM? I read the British papers once a week, the Sunday Telegraph and Sunday Times. And I am reliably told, I presume, that Scargill's objective is to destroy the capitalist system and that he is a dedicated Marxist.
Again, I don't think this is true. This is a complete media slander. Scargill is a member of the British Labour Party, a constitutional parliamentary party.
How can I believe you when I've been brainwashed, if you tell me it's brainwashed, by quotes from Scargill saying the object of the exercise is to bring down this government?
No, I've never heard Scargill say that. I believe that's probably a misquote or a total blatant lie on behalf of the press.
All right, what about the fact that it's been repeated again and again and again that there has been no ballot for this strike?
Again, not true. In each of the mining areas, a year or so ago, there was a ballot taken, an area-by-area ballot. In my area, Yorkshire, which is one of the largest, most militant areas of the union, with some 58,000 miners, the membership returned the leadership an 86% mandate to call a strike on the question of pit closures.
On a referendum ballot or a show of hands at the pit head?
On a referendum ballot.
Now, in 1980, the miners refused by ballot to strike. In 1982, they refused by ballot to strike.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a ballot this year of the National Union of Miners for a strike?
No, we didn't need a ballot. The leadership of the union had the mandate from the membership to call a strike on this question of pit closures.
In other words, it's the old business of the executive of the union deciding that they would go on strike.
No, again, this is simply not true. The membership did vote on the strike. The membership did vote to support any moves taken by the National Executive. By the way, when you talk about democracy, this is a one-sided argument. I don't recall being given the opportunity to vote for Ian McGregor, a man who is threatening the industry, a man who is threatening my future and the futures of tens of thousands of miners. I was not given that opportunity whatsoever. Neither were miners given the opportunity to vote on the question of pit closures. So I think this democracy argument is a very one-sided argument.
In other words, you come down to the old capitalist argument. Who runs the country?
Well, we're not disputing who runs the country. Obviously, the elected government runs the country.
But you think you should have had a say in the appointment of this guy, the elderly American, as I keep calling him, appointed by the National Coal Board to run the whole industry?
Well, first of all, he was appointed by the Conservative government to deliberately butcher the industry. And I think it's only fair. We elected our union president. He received a 70% vote from his membership. I think it's only fair that we should have the right to decide who should run our industry. Our industry, the industry I've worked in for 9 years. This guy has only been associated with the industry for some 10 months.
I don't see how you can get the right to appoint the boss of the management side. I mean, do you want the government to have a vote in the appointment of Scargill as a leader of the miners' union?
Again, what the government can vote as much as they want on the issue. The fact is that the majority of miners support Scargill and have always supported Scargill.
Now, therefore, well, tell me I'm brainwashed when I say it looks like the old Marxist plot, especially when you look at McGahey in Scotland. Now, there's an out-and-out good old left-wing commie if ever there was one, isn't he? McGahey.
Well, that is true. McGarkey is a member of the Communist Party. But this is no reflection on the National Executive of the Union. There are many different political trends represented on the National Executive of the National Union of
So
Mine
therefore
Workers.
I'm swallowing the red baiting if I believe that this guy Scargill wants to smash the Conservative or even the Labour Party government of the United Kingdom unless he gets total control of the mining industry.
Indeed you are, because Scargill is not running this strike. Scargill did not call the strike. The strike was called for and voted on by the National Executive of the Union, which is both encompasses left and right-wing elements.
But the membership didn't have a vote.
As I said, we did have a vote.
In 1982 you rejected it.
Yes, but the executive did take a vote, did get a mandate to call strike action if they should need to do so.
Well, now let's look at some of the other cases. The decision was made by this guy, McGregor, to close down 20,000 jobs in 20 mines. You say you had no objection to that?
No, I'm saying I do object to that. The overall intention was to close between 70 and 100 mines and lay off up to 100,000 miners. That's a total decimation of the mining industry because we only have around 183,000 members. So that would be a total decimation of our membership. Now, this is a deliberate political act by the government to try and break our union as part of an overriding attack on the trade union movement as a whole in Britain.
You mean to replace you with scab labour?
No, as I say, to break the union so that they can then go on to attack the trade union movement as a whole and force down workers' living standards and pay.
Well, how come the other unions are not supporting you? Your dock strike collapsed.
Again, the dock workers went on strike on 2 occasions to stop the importation of scab coal through Union docks, and they achieved that objective.
The steel workers go through your picket lines at Ravenscraig in Scotland and elsewhere to keep the furnaces going, don't they?
Again, this is a direct result of the misleadership of the steel unions. This guy, Bill Sayers, well, he's a scam. He sold his own union out back in the 1981 steelworkers strike, and he's now trying to sell the mine workers out. The fact of the matter is that the miners do have a mass of support from rank-and-file steelworkers. At the nearby Scunthorpe Steelworks, which is some 20 miles away from Doncaster, steelworkers there on many occasions have invited miners over, have hired a club and given the miners a good time, plus given them a lot of money for their soup kitchens.
The General Convention of the Trade Union Congress gave very lacklustre support to the miners' strike. In fact, I think they opposed it at one stage.
No, again, that's totally incorrect. They gave overwhelming support. There was a 20-to-1 vote in favour of supporting the miners' strike.
But they wouldn't call out a general strike, would they? They refused to go for a general strike.
Yes, but that's a rather preemptive to be thinking in terms of a general strike at this stage.
More with Steve Shukla, and your calls too. Maybe I have been brainwashed. All I read are the capitalist papers and watch the capitalist television in this country. And Steve is a member of which party?
I'm a member of the British Labour Party.
Right-hand side or left-hand side?
Left.
After the break. Hold on, I'll use you, don't go away. I want to come at you a little more sympathetically this time.
OK. Thank you.
Ah, stop it.
No, Jack, sit still. Come on.
Get to my age, not even the good-looking one. Even good-looking ones can annoy you. The ugly ones make you throw up. I must confess to Steve Shukla that I drove through a mining village not far from Edinburgh when I was over in Britain this summer. And here was a nice, clean, tight little community with good housing, about 1,500 people. I think there were maybe 500 or 600 miners in the pit. And one of the miners was saying, what the hell do we get now? They closed down the pit, these are our homes, there are no jobs, there's no future, there's no nothing, we might as well strike. Is that an attitude that's common?
Yes, because it's a very realistic attitude. The mine where I work at, for example, the entire community of Armthorpe was built around that mine. The stores, the businesses, everything in that community are dependent upon that mine and the employment which it provides. So in effect, by closing down that particular mine, you would close down an entire community. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 communities, we're talking about up to 100. This would mean the total wiping out of these communities. It would mean resigning people to a lifetime of misery, of unemployment, not only the miners, but the sons and daughters and the wives of miners.
Because it's hard to believe, but was your father a miner?
Yes, my father still is a miner.
So therefore you followed, I thought the ambition of every miner was to get out of these dirty, filthy, dank, horrible pits and get the hell away from them.
Well, that's true. I'm sure there's much better jobs to be done, but the fact of the matter is that I have a job in the mining industry. It's the only job which I'm likely to ever have, the way things are in Britain at the moment, with 6 million unemployed.
3 million unemployed.
Again, these are distorted government figures.
Yours are probably just as distorted.
No, I refuse to accept that. The real figures are in excess of 5 to 6 million.
All right, now supposing you were a nice, peaceful, supine, gutless, spineless, conservative miner, how would you do? What would you get if you accepted the redundancy meekly and your mine happened to be closed? What would you get in cash?
Well, given my term of service, which is 9 years, I would receive around £9,000 cash redundancy payment or severance pay. That to me is nothing. I can earn that kind of money in a year or so. So they would give me £9,000, but I would be ineligible for any state unemployment benefits because I had such a large sum of money. Therefore, receiving this lump sum of £9,000 is, in effect, receiving 2 years' unemployment benefit in one lump sum.
In advance,
yeah.
Disqualifying you from all other UIC benefits. But if I'm a miner who's worked for 50 years, what do I get if I'm bought out? £50,000?
Yes.
And do I get a state mining pension distinct from my old age pension?
Oh yes, it's a very good deal for an elderly miner who's about to retire. But of course, they cannot. But the entire workforce, which they're trying to lay off, some 100,000, are not all elderly guys near retirement age.
Well, they say 20,000. 20 mines, 20,000. You say 100,000.
Yes, they say 20 mines and 20,000 jobs this year. The overall intention over the next 4 years is between 70 and 100 mines and up to 100,000 jobs.
The other thing that struck me in Scotland last year was that while the strike was going on, your good friends in Eastern Europe are shipping in Polish coal, which is apparently cheaper to mine than Scottish or English coal.
Indeed, that's the case. We have a situation where the Polish regime, a right-wing Stalinist regime, has already attacked and defeated the workers' movement in Poland, has already beaten the trade unions, and is now actively supporting Thatcher in her attempts to crush and defeat the British trade union movement.
Are all the Eastern European dictatorships supporting Thatcher?
No, indeed, the Russian miners have actually sent some $65,000 to the British mine workers in their struggle.
Miserable. There was almost some kind of tentative agreement over the weekend. That collapsed. Did you hear anything about it?
Yes, as I understand it, the agreement was based on an ACAS proposal, that's the arbitration service. It was based on the proposal that there be an independent body which would mediate between the two sides and try and work out some common policy on what criteria a mine should close. The stumbling block in this agreement was that the coal board would have the final word. So you would have a situation where this independent body may have come along and said, well, we don't think you ought to close this mine, it's a viable economic mine. And the coal board, having the last word, would say, well, we're going to shut it anyway. Well, that's no agreement.
But you're going to keep the strike on through the winter?
Yes.
Maggie says she's got enough coal and enough miners working. How many miners are working now?
I believe there are some 40,000 scabs in the industry.
40,000 out of a total labour force of just under 200,000?
Yes.
That shows you a pretty strong will to work, doesn't it? Because they've got to battle their way through picket lines in most places.
No, not so. The majority of these miners work in the central coalfield of Nottinghamshire. And in Nottinghamshire, there is an army of 10,000 cops. 10,000 cops whose sole job is to keep away striking miners from picketing these mines, whose sole job is to escort these scabs into work.
Well, isn't that the law?
The law? They're deliberately using these cops as a political force to try and break the miners' strike.
But these miners don't want to strike, the ones in the central Nottingham coalfields, do they?
Well, that's true, they don't want to scab. They've been bought off by the government. In This is, again, a government ploy, a deliberate attempt to divide the union and break the base of the strike.
But you're quite prepared to stay on strike this winter and bring Britain to its knees if necessary?
If need be, yes.
Fair enough. Take some calls. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I'm not an expert on this, but I spent 5 weeks in England and I followed it quite closely. And one of the things that when you see that footing that you had of the police charging the miners, the union always looks at like the police are the heavies, but it's not the police that are throwing the pieces of concrete that are throwing the rocks that are using ball bearings. It's the miners that are instigating the violence, and then when the police react, they say police brutality, but the police are standing there peaceably, letting the miners that want to go to work walk to work.
Okay, that's your point. You say he's not telling me the truth.
Well, that's right. And another thing, Jack,
Just a minute, let him answer that.
Scargill...
Let him answer that.
Well, I'd just like to say on the question of violence, on the question of picket line violence, I think the facts and figures speak for themselves. So far during this strike, we've had 5 striking miners killed, and we've had over 3,000 striking miners injured. Amongst those, the union president, Arthur Scargill, who was beaten up by the cops. Also, we've had over 7,000 miners arrested. So I think it shows quite clearly where the violence is coming from and who it's been directed at.
And how many policemen have been injured in that period of time?
I believe the figure I last got was 800, not even a third of the amount of striking miners who have been injured.
And you talk about Scargill being a union man, a very strong union man. He is the one that has denounced Lech Walesa in the Solidarity movement in Poland. And Lech Walesa wants free elections, and Scargill says no, that they should never have free elections in the Polish Union.
I don't know.
Again, I do believe that Scargill did retract that statement at some stage.
He retracted it. Hey, okay, good. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I'm just curious. You know, I've been watching the strikes not only in the United Kingdom, but throughout the United States and even here in Canada. And what it seems to me is that the state, whether it's through an economic conference and you know, coordinating their efforts, but it just seems like the states in a lot of places, a lot of countries around the world, mostly the free nations, of course, are trying to break unions. And it's a concerted effort to break unions.
Okay, worldwide conspiracy to smash unions.
Indeed, we've seen this. I've seen this for myself firsthand. The experience that workers in the trade union movement in America are suffering, and also here in Canada. We seem to have this triple axis: the Conservative administration of Reagan and Thatcher, and the Conservative administration here in Canada seem to have come together in common agreement on how they're going to tackle their own labour movement. And how
they're trying to cut costs to make profits so that the capitalist free enterprise mixed economy system can survive.
Yeah, well, they're talking in purely economic terms. They're not talking in terms of human beings and people's rights and liberties.
Well, we've got a government like that in Victoria, but many people sympathise with it because they're short of money. We're not selling any trees. We're not selling any ore. We ain't got no cash. Surely Britain's in the same hard-up position.
Indeed, but it's no answer to sack tens of thousands of workers because their economic spending power will be lost, and therefore that will only deepen the crisis.
Matter of fact, we've got a government here that has really put us in a headspin because of the chintzy restraint in many ways. After the break, more calls to Shukla. How do you feel when you see Scargill driving around in his fancy Jag, or is it a Rolls Royce?
Well, again, Scargill needs this kind of a car to get him around the country to do his job effectively.
Hardly the image of the downtrodden worker he has, eh?
Well, perhaps not, but nothing's too good for our union leadership.
However, once he's dictator, he'll be all right, won't he? He'll scale down. Go ahead to Steve Shukla from Armthorpe, England, a member of the striking NUM, who wants to see the Thatcher thrown out and the country brought to its knees if necessary. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
First of all, I'd like to put in the picture, eh? I used to be a coal miner for 5 years, a face worker in Sheffield, England. I used to be on the police force in Sheffield, England for 12 years. So I think I can safely view it from both sides. This young guy that we got on the television show today, I think we should send him back home. Let him do some research. 11 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, I came to Canada. The reason I came to Canada was because the miners were on a similar type of strike. The country was on 3 days. And just before I came to England...
Came to Canada?
Pardon?
Just before you came to Canada?
As you were, Canada, yes. And just before I came to Canada, Scargill went on television openly and admitted, and I quote, these are his exact words, if the guy wants to go and look them on video or whatever, I have no interest in the miners. It is my intention to break the government. And that is when I think it was Ted Heath was in.
And he broke Ted Heath.
And he broke Ted Heath. Now, as I say, I was a face worker, and I worked down all the mines in Yorkshire. My father was a coal miner all his life till he died. My grandfather was a coal miner.
What's your question? Is that your question, that Scargill is a fink?
No, well, we don't really know that. But what I'm saying is the guy should go home, and he said that his father is a coal miner. He should ask his father to be truthful. Because the mines in Yorkshire there, where all this dispute is coming from, when it was under private enterprise some 50 or 60 years ago, the mines were played out. When I was down there...
Okay, enough from you. What do you say to that guy who obviously doesn't like you, and he uses the quote that I know about him, that it was his intention to break the government, and he did break Ted Heath.
Well, I have very vivid recollections of the '74 miners' strike, as my father was a miner. Scargill was not the national president of the union at that time. Joe Gormley was the national president of our union at that time. So whatever remarks Scargill may have made were not in the context of him being the union president.
You don't feel that you're the one that's been brainwashed and not me the one that's been brainwashed?
No, indeed not.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack. Just thought I'd call. I was wondering, I'd like to ask Steve if you were in the position of the president of a company, would you, if you're losing money, would you shut your company down, or would you keep your employees on and continue to lose money?
Yeah, a good question.
Well, this again boils down to the government's argument about closing uneconomic mines. They're saying that that they must slim down the industry, that they must close uneconomic capacity. This is not the case. There is no such thing as an uneconomic mine in Britain. Mining is an extractive process which needs constant capital investment. And the fact of the matter is, for the past decade, 81% of investment in the mining industry has either gone into entirely new projects or into the central coalfields of Nottinghamshire. That's why we have the scab movement in Nottinghamshire, because the mines have been brought up such a high level, and these people don't feel that their jobs are threatened. At the same time they're announcing these so-called uneconomic closures, the government has been concentrating on a policy of nuclear power. Since getting re-elected in 1979, the government then released a report, the Ridley Report, in which they said that a nuclear power programme would have the advantage of removing a substantial portion of electricity generation from disruption by the industrial action of coal miners and transport workers.
Well, that's logical.
Well, that was a clear political move to try and break the back of the union. And believe me, there's nothing more inefficient, dangerous and uneconomic as nuclear power, yet they're prepared to face that hazard rather than take on coal miners.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster.
Yes.
You ask your guest to explain how it was that during successive Labour governments preceding the Thatcher government, more than 100 uneconomic pits were closed down without protest by the National Union of Miners.
Good question.
Yes, again, there have been a lot of mines closed during the history of the union. Again, our union has never opposed the closure of a mine which they felt had to close, which they felt was either unworkable or worked out. The union has followed a consistent policy, and we're not trying to keep open and outdated, antiquated mines at all.
You mean just in this particular case you said you're not going to close any more mines without our approval, and you're not going to bring in this elderly American import to give us a bad time?
Yeah, because the question is not about closing uneconomic mines, it's a question of closing mines to try and break the union.
Stevie, you still leave me with a feeling that it is a political strike headed by this guy, Scargill.
It is a political strike. It's headed by Thatcher.
Well, Thatcher and Scargill. Thatcher at least is elected. Scargill isn't elected.
We elected Scargill. 70% of all miners elected Scargill.
I know, that's the leader of a union, for God's sake.
Yeah, well, he's doing his job as a union man.
Do you think a Labour government would do any different from Thatcher nowadays?
Yes, I've no doubt that they would.
Under Kinnock? He's a right-wing Labour man, isn't he?
Yes, but even a right-wing Labour man is preferable to the extremist Conservatives.
OK, one more short segment with Shukla. And I'll put up the address at the end of the next one. If you want to send money to the miners, you send it. After break.
Okay.
You're too smooth, Stevie. I wish they'd send out a grizzled old commie, because you just push aside all my stuff and make me feel like an idiot.
Well, we have a case which has to be presented. All that I'm doing is simply presenting the facts.
The one thing you haven't convinced me on is that Scargill is going to do anything other than try and smash the democratic government of Britain, whether it's Labour or Tory.
The key to ending this strike is that the government withdraws its pit closure programme. That's all they need to do.
If the government does as it's told, you will go back to work.
If the government gives miners the right to work, gives miners the right to provide for their wives, children, and secure their futures, then the strike will end.
Yeah, I must confess, there are different aspects of it, because there are whole communities in Britain without the mines which become permanent blights for them and their occupants. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Gentlemen should have a red face and sleepless nights. I've had the opportunity to travel back and forth to Britain. He's not truthful. You were right, Jack. In his Liberal Party there convention, they stated 3+ million unemployed. Also, he should be reminded that the population of Britain put the Thatcher government in with a majority, and he shouldn't be like a crybaby because he's not getting his own way. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
That's the old democratic bit. Democracy is on Maggie's side, not on your side.
A thing worth noting about Thatcher's majority is that only 33% of those eligible to vote actually participated in the general election. And then Thatcher only received some 30% of that 33%. So they received, in effect, 10% of the electoral roll.
But that's the way it works. You know perfectly well the way you rig a union meeting is bring the stuff on late at night when everybody's gone to the pub, so the dedicated people can pass democratically what they want.
Again, you see, Scargill was elected by 70% of all coal mines in Britain, so he is doing his job.
70% of 100% or 70% of those who voted?
70% of around 90% who voted.
Go ahead from Prince George.
Yeah, I'd just like to say to Steve, kids, keep it up, because if you don't break the government will sure break your union, because you're sure doing it around here, that's for sure. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's quite true. The government is, at this moment, is trying to break the British trade union movement, and the same thing is happening both here and in America.
Go ahead from Williams Lake.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'm just watching Steve Shukla, and I tell you, I'm getting pretty upset with what is happening in England right now.
Go on.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think the best thing that ever happened to England was Mrs. Thatcher. I feel Scargill, what he is trying on right now, is blatant treason. And I thought they used to hang people for this.
Fair enough, ma'am. He's a traitor, says the woman from Williams Lake.
No, Scargill is doing the job that he's been elected to do, represent the National Union of Mineworkers and its membership.
Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
It seems to me that if Neil Kinnock were Prime Minister and were to get up in the House of Commons and close as many mines as Mrs. Thatcher has, or is proposing to, that it would be all fine. Well, not fine, but it wouldn't be as opposed as it is. This is obviously a political problem. And it seems to me also that Mr. Shukla is ignoring Mr. Scargill's earlier comments, as you pointed out. I don't think a leopard changes its spots overnight, and especially someone who's, in the position that Mr. Scargill is. So I really don't think we're looking at a totally economic matter. I just think this is a political ploy to...
Yeah, political ploy, but he's tough. He didn't even show up at court when the charge cited him for contempt, did they?
That's correct. As I again, I will repeat, this is a political strike because the government is seeking to break our union and attack the trade union movement as a whole in
Well,
Britain.
you're giving it every opportunity, you must confess. I'm surprised that they haven't brought out the army. I thought at one stage they might have brought out the army to get these guys to work.
I believe that it's quite a possibility this coming winter.
And I bet you Thatcher's supporters would go for that, wouldn't they?
Indeed they would.
Because they want the miners who want to go to work. I mean, you're supposed to be restricted to 6 pickets per pit head, haven't you?
Indeed.
And you've said the hell with that, haven't you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are fighting for our basically for our future, for our jobs.
And you're quite prepared to go to jail as a martyr if you're nailed for contempt or whatever, aren't you?
Indeed, I'm prepared to go to jail because I'm fighting for my job. I refuse to accept these rulings.
Democratically made by a democratically elected government. You won't accept them.
Yeah, I won't accept the fact that they can threaten my job, my future, and my family's future.
Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Hello.
That's you.
Oh, okay, Jack.
Right.
Sure. And Nottinghamshire has always been the soft spot in the miners' union. In the 1926, I don't know where you were, but they were the first ones to cave in then, and they are now. You see, their mines are so much younger than the other ones, so they're not interested in fighting to keep the old mines open, because they know their damn mines are going to stay open for quite a while.
Are you an old Nottingham miner?
No, I never worked in the mines, but I worked in it. I was born in a town near Nottingham that was quite interested in coal mining.
He's right on that, isn't he?
Yes, he's perfectly correct on that question, that the Nottinghamshire area did cave in during the 1926 strike. As he pointed out, the mines are fairly recent mines, and as I've already pointed out, they have received the bulk of investment that's been put into the mining industry has gone into this area to make it the weak link in the miners' chain.
Which side are you on, man, from Nottinghamshire?
Oh, I've always been on the Labour side.
Okay, he's with you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. Just like to say welcome to Canada to Mr. Shukla. I was born in the northeast of England, which of working-class parents, and my brother works in the shipyards. And we were brought up to be very pro-labor. But after a while, we began to question it, and we found out that really there was a lot of rhetoric there, and there was a lot of misleading statements. And we both turned conservative. Now, you can't go on economically ruining mines just like they have in Poland. You just cannot afford to maintain everyone in employment there. But let me ask this question. Can you really support removing the freedom of choice of those miners in Nottingham and elsewhere to go to work?
Want to work?
As I've said, we have had the ballot. In my own area, in Yorkshire, the mandate was the area leadership was given an 86% mandate. These people are scabbing, they're blatantly scabbing, and they're using the excuse of no national ballot. It's a blatant lie.
Well, no, there hasn't been a national ballot for this strike.
Well, indeed, there has been a ballot. The National Executive does have a basis for calling the strike.
Okay.
And indeed, those Nottinghamshire miners that do want to work are being guaranteed that they can get to work. So nobody's preventing them working.
If I cross the picket line once, do I get paid for the length of the strike? If I scab once, do I go on the payroll and stay on the payroll?
As long as you are working.
Do they make me go to work every day if I do what you call scabbing?
Yeah, oh yeah, you'll have to work every day. But in some cases, where they've tried to break the strike, they've managed to get in 2 or 3 scabs who have just sat in the canteen for the duration of the shift.
What can 3 men do?
Indeed, and these are what they call partially working mines, though.
OK, Steve, I'm going to give you your pound of flesh. Put up their address. See it? Co-op Bank, Sheffield, England. Miners' Fund. Thank you, Steve Shukla. And I hope you come to your senses one of these days and get rid of Scargill and end the strike.
Thank you.
Will it ever happen?
No, I believe that Scargill is doing a magnificent job representing the National Union of Mineworkers and its membership, and I hope he continues to do so for a long time.
One of us is brainwashed. Which one, I'm not sure. I'll be back with Bill Ritchie, Minister of Municipal Affairs, after the break.
Yeah, why don't you fucking well fix the Ganges so I can put that goddamn thing in?
I will.
That's good.
One thing at a time.
So you're going to go 2 here, Jack?
Did you read some of this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. And here's some general stuff.
Oh, let's go on this.
You're looking great, Jack.
I lost 30 pounds.
I lost some weight too. You're looking great.
You're
Just
looking
saying.
good. I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Cupie, yeah. Evert Hooger.
Evert Hooger.
As in booger with an H instead. Evert.
Bill Ritchie is Minister of Municipal Affairs in the Social Credit Government of Victoria. I'm going to leave my general criticisms of the Social Credit Government of Victoria to get down to business. You remember, Bill Ritchie, when Van der Zalm tried to bring in his really Get Tough Act against the districts and the municipalities. And when you people wouldn't go for it, he called you all gutless and walked away. Is that correct?
Well, that's what they say. I wasn't part of cabinet at that time, Jack, but...
They tell me that you're bringing in many of the radical or so-called radical Van der Zalm plans so quietly that nobody has noticed. This program is for the benefit of Harcourt and Van der Zalm.
Well, Jack, these aren't radical plans. These are common sense plans. Really, what has happened over the years, we've seen a build-up of government at the regional level. We've seen planning develop to the point where it's almost strangling economic development in some areas, and I'm just methodically unwinding that and getting it back to a common sense position.
No, but are you going to wipe out, say, for instance, the planning or zoning functions of regional districts?
No, not wipe them out, because regional districts still have a function. You know, they're there to serve the needs of the unincorporated areas and also provide joint services to member municipalities where it can be done at a lower cost. But what we intend to do is get the brakes on to rural planning. You know, people in this province who have moved out into the rural areas, they go out there because of the freedom, because they get away from all of the regulation and red tape that comes with local government. But because of what has happened in the past through this planning process, all this regulation and red tape has followed them. We're going to pull that back again.
But mind you, the regulation and red tape had to come when you think of some of the disgusting ribbon building and two-bit shack building between here and Hope.
Yeah.
Somebody had to... Where was it? I was the other day, and I thought, where is the centre of this town?
Yeah.
Surrey, for instance.
Well,
what a mess it is in places.
Yeah, well, of course, Surrey's a municipality, and that's up to the planners there, and you're right. Surrey is
I'm talking about the initial ribbon building and botching up that went along the highway.
Well, I contribute some of that problem to one of our old policies where they got some very lucrative funding for sewer and water, and it allowed them to put those services out where they weren't really needed at the time, resulting in spot zoning or spot construction and ribbon development.
So what are you going to do to regional districts? For instance, have you got an ex-cabinet minister presently doing a review of regional districts?
Yes, sir, but this isn't a typical government study, you know, where we spend a year studying and building up massive amounts of paper. Dan Campbell.
He's thought up the whole regional district.
That's right, and who knows better what regional districts were originally intended to do than Dan Campbell?
And is Dan going to bring you firm plans to clip the wings of regional districts?
Jack, we're doing it differently. We're doing it in a more business-like way. Jack goes into a regional district.
Dan does.
Dan does. And if he needs any backup staff, he gets that. And he goes in there and he reviews everything that's been done, why it's been done and how it's been done. And he brings back to me a report and recommendations for change, after which I go out there with Dan and staff to the regional board, and we discuss this report and these recommendations with them, and then we instruct them to get on with these changes. So we're correcting them as we go along. However, whenever the entire...
You're now, quote, spying on regional districts. Campbell says, you're making a mess of this, far too much red tape. Hey, Bill. And Bill says, do it that way.
No, not spying.
Doesn't that leave a big hole for you to help your real estate development friends?
No, I haven't got any real estate friends.
What? A social creditor?
No, I have got no real estate friends, none whatsoever.
I thought you were the developer's best friend.
Everybody's my friend. Real estate people aren't only my friends. But no, what he does is he comes back to me with this review and with his recommendations, and if I agree with the recommendations, then I go out with him and staff. We discuss it with the board, and we instruct them to move ahead.
Supposing, for instance, I wanted to put in a shopping centre in unorganized territory. Now, to do that at the moment through the regional district would take 10 years and $100,000.
And most likely you'd be broke before you got to it.
So what are you going to do to help me?
Well, we're looking at that, Jack, and one of the proposals that we're looking at is that we don't believe that rural areas require both settlement planning and zoning. Now, what happens is at the moment, they want to put in a settlement plan. That plan has to go through all the rigors of public hearings and so forth, and all they've done in there is designate what may happen where within that region. What I'm saying is that I don't believe that we then have to follow through with zoning, which is the same process. Then you come along and you want to put in a project. You also have to go to public hearing and get rezoning and so forth. What we're looking at is to have the plan provide everything. The plan would provide designations for residential, industrial, commercial development within a zoned area, an electoral area. And you want to do something, you would simply go then to the regional board and get your permit And as long as your construction was within the criteria there, a building code, etc., then go ahead.
You'd wipe out the whole duplicated zoning procedure.
Yeah, in rural areas.
In rural areas.
Only.
We're talking about unorganized territory.
Unorganized areas, with one exception, Jack, and I must make this very clear, but we have the unorganized rural area that is adjacent to a municipality. Now, we know that that has to be an expansion area for a municipality.
Right.
There has to be more refined planning there so that it's compatible with what's happening within a municipality.
Okay.
Okay.
Two other questions. I hate to ask it, but I got to ask it.
Go ahead.
What are you going to do about this incredible bot shop waste of money and damnable confusion over the Ganges sewer? Now, there's no conflict of interest. I'm not on the sewer. I don't need a sewer. God bless the sewer. But what a mess that has been. Places floating in sewage. We've spent $2.5 or $3 million and got nothing. What are you going to do about the Ganges sewer?
We're going to fix that up, Jack. I don't have the final answer here, but I can assure you we're going to fix that up without any more undue loss of time.
Does that mean you're going to order the sewer to go ahead?
I have instructed my staff to go ahead and take a look at what is required in order to connect up to that outfall pipe, which I understand has cost about $2 million. There's about $2 million laying in there in an outfall pipe that can't be used. They're working with the people there locally now, and I hope that within months we'll have a decision on that.
Will you make an arbitrary decision if you get no cooperation?
That's normally what has to happen at times, and I don't hesitate if necessary.
Smile on his face, Bill Ritchie, Minister of Municipal Affairs, indicated that arbitrary powers may be used to finish up this unholy mess in Ganges on the sewer question.
It's too costly to the community.
While we're at it, when are you going to cut the throat of the Islands Trust?
Oh, I'm not going to cut the throat of the Islands Trust, Jack, but I believe that the Islands Trust are now beginning to realize that they're not an identity all by themselves. The Islands Trust I consider to be another regional district, although they have their own act. But I pointed out to them that if that act should get in the way of their cooperating with the minister, then I would remove the act. But I want to assure you, Jack, that they are starting to cooperate, and I consider they have a responsibility to preserve those islands.
Yeah, the threat of going to the hangman's noose concentrates one's mind astonishingly.
Yeah.
More with Bill Ritchie after the break. Then we come to the Vancouver civic election. Cope and the NDP versus that ex-shining light of social credit by the name of Billy Van der Zalm. I was surprised when Bennett backed him.
Well, you know.
Do you back him?
Sure.
Do you like him?
Yeah, I think he's an innovative, exciting guy. He's what Vancouver needs, especially with Expo 86 coming up.
He's what your cabinet doesn't need. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not talking about that. Our cabinet's fine. I'm talking about Vancouver. We need a group in there, Jack, who's going to be innovative, who's going to have that vigor to go ahead and do the things that must be done to take advantage.
The full power of the social credit party machine be put behind Van der Zalm?
Oh, no, I doubt it. No, Jack doesn't, or Bill doesn't need that. Man, he's got, he can do it himself.
Right. Speaking now as Mayor Harcourt's personal representative, are you going to change the charter to let Vancouver have a ward system which has been called for endless years and seems to be democracy to most of us?
No.
What?
No.
No ward system?
No.
Why not?
Because, when you elect people to come to a council table, they're there as a team to administer the affairs of that community, not come there to play politics.
You're elected on a ward system.
That's different. Provincial is an opposition party and the federal have an opposition party, but the community, the people paying tax dollars can't afford opposition playing games at the council table.
In other words, they've all got to get together and come to you as a team.
No ward system.
No ward. That's firm.
That's firm. As long as I'm minister.
All right, now, are you going to bring in an amendment to something or other to prevent them from taking $500,000 from the successors of developers who have overbuilt against the code?
Jack, that's absolutely disgusting. Here we have a situation where I would expect that the inspectors were inspecting that project all the way through. Now, why didn't they notice this earlier?
Because it was all in very small pieces, thicknesses of walls, very technical.
Very minute. So if it's so minute that inspectors didn't notice it while the inspection and the construction was going on, it didn't justify such a horrendous penalty.
But I'm told that the penalty was willingly paid and that it has been used for housing for poor people and that everything the city council did was perfectly legal and proper.
Jack, you know, some things are perfectly legal, but I'm not so sure that proper. I disagree with that. I think it's a dangerous precedent. I think it's something that if it were allowed to take place throughout this province, we would have a serious problem in our hands. We don't have a municipality in British Columbia that hasn't got some zone that's been conflicted with at all. I have to ask the question, why wasn't this brought up during the inspections? And if it was, who received those inspectors' reports without acting on them on time? I don't like it. I think it's wrong. And I have advised the mayor and council of that. And I certainly hope that it will never be repeated in this province.
Well, that's fair enough. Next thing, are you planning any other changes in the Vancouver Charter?
Well, now we got a number of things on our plate right now, Jack.
Let me try one on your plate. Let me try one on your plate. As a good right-wing social creditor, do you object strongly to Vancouver City Council passing, I think it was a dozen or a couple of dozen, international resolutions involving referendums in some cases?
Well, Jack, I really don't believe in any local council getting involved in matters that they have no jurisdiction over or control over. But let's get to the root of the real root of the question here is there isn't one in this province or in this country or the world as far as that goes who would support nuclear war or nuclear arms. We're all against it. You and I were through it in the old war. We know what it was like in the last war in the old country.
You're not as old as me.
Hey? Well, what do you mean? I'm just as old as you are. You just look older.
You're not drawing the old age pension.
Oh, you?
You're not. Of course I am.
Oh, well, then I take it back. There must be a couple of years between us. But anyway, it's a motherhood issue, and
you don't think City Council should waste time doing it?
Well, it's not. They should debate those things if they wish. I simply say that property tax dollars should be used to provide the services in the community that they were originally designed for. And I don't really think that property taxes should be used for those things, used for international travel by aldermen, etc., etc.
Yeah. What annoys you about international travel by aldermen?
Well, listen, what on earth are we going to benefit the people of Vancouver if we have an alderman or two make a trip to Russia or make a trip to even Edinburgh or wherever?
Are you objecting to Warnock Kennedy going to Edinburgh?
I object to all these aldermen flying all over the world at the taxpayers' expense.
Cabinet ministers do it.
I see nothing wrong with a mayor going out there to represent his city and promote his city. But what on earth are we going to gain by an alderman or two going over to Russia? Now, if they took their picket signs over there to oppose nuclear arms and nuclear war and marched in the streets, then I would say good work.
Yeah.
Huh?
But are you going to ban this nuclear freeze referenda by statute, by change of the charter?
No.
Just try and make a fool of them.
No. I just tell them what I think.
No more international travel. You can't stop that by statute.
No, I can't stop it. They have their own charter, and I can't stop it.
Where have you been this year as a cabinet minister?
I've been all over the place, Jack. Listen here. I have visited at least 60 councils on their territory over the past 15 months.
60 councils?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
you mean in BC?
In British
I'm
Columbia.
talking about international trips.
Oh, well, I was in Saskatchewan, Alberta last week looking at some things that are going on there.
International trips?
No, I don't do that.
You don't do that?
No. Someday I may.
What are you going to do about, you made a fairly strong statement that do you believe that unionists in the public sector should have the right to strike?
No.
Are you going to stop it?
Well, I can't stop it, Jack, but certainly the Minister of Labour is going to be getting out there and getting the views of the public at large.
Oh, yeah,
That's right. That's right, and I commend him for that. I think that's an excellent exercise, but I personally don't believe that it's fair that those people who are being paid from the tax dollars should have that right to shut the system down.
Do you believe that union-free zones, like tax-free ports, or whatever they call these things, do you believe that union-free zones should be set up in British Columbia?
Well, there's been some talk about enterprise zones where we could encourage industry that would be directed to export, that would be brand new to our province, that would create jobs in our province. I think there's a place for them, Jack. We have to be very, very careful how we set them up. And there has been some talk that these could be also union-free as well.
You could call them scab zones.
No. Listen here, I run my own business before I got into government, and I didn't have a union there only because they didn't want it.
Because you were a good employer, presumably.
Well, sure, but that doesn't make me a
But supposing you had been some kind of horrible fink.
Well, then I would deserve a union.
You would have been unionized.
I should have had it then, too, yeah. And any company that has one, they deserve it.
Listen, you've given me a plethora of goodies this morning.
Oh?
No ward system for Vancouver. You're against international travel for Vancouver. You're still not happy with the
Except for the mayor.
Except for the mayor.
Yeah.
You support, what's his name, McClellan in no strikes in the public sector. And you consider enterprise zones.
Yeah.
And are you going to wipe out regional districts, holus bolus?
Not entirely, but we're going to roll them back to their original intent. We're going to remove them from some functions that become too large a bureaucracy in many areas.
How many civil servants do you plan to lay off, or do you expect might be laid off as you go through trimming their wings?
There is a constant reduction as we go through, because as we go through the process, they find out that they have more staff than they need in certain areas.
Bill Ritchie, Minister of Municipal Affairs, you've been a breath of fresh air. I'm sorry I can't take calls to you this morning because I've got to follow up a story about the doctors.
Oh, yeah.
They're
important.
No, it's this question of the billing.
Oh, yeah.
Wiping out $19 million with a lifestyle billing.
Oh, yeah.
One of that includes treatment for obesity, which I used to suffer from. My thanks to Bill Ritchie. Next, David Schreck of CU&C. Besides, they're going to be a nice guy now.
No, you don't want him to crack on the...
No. This is a BC Medical Association. Have you seen? As I understand it, a letter was leaked to the Vancouver Sun, which indicates that the BC Medical Association's General Practice Section has decided not to bill a medical services plan for certain services. And that to me means that if you accept these certain services, which are apparently going to be under a ban from the BC Medical, you will have to pay the bills yourself. Now, I couldn't get a doctor on the air this morning about it, so let's start on the attack, because I want to interview the medical profession in detail on the whole question of billing numbers and who gets them and who doesn't get them, and the government's plans to cap in some way the present unlimited cost of fee-for-service. So I've asked David Schreck, Executive Director of the CU&C, and a politician in his own right, but for the moment Executive Director of CU&C, to tell me what you interpret from this leaked letter which threatens to hit the patient's pocketbooks.
Well, it's not going to hit the patient's pocketbooks. I would be very surprised if any physicians who are currently billing for counseling services turn around and collect from their patients. There could be a few exceptional cases where outstanding jobs are done, where the person would have the money that they would pay a social worker or a psychologist otherwise, and there's a real market for that service. But by and large, we are not talking about any form of extra billing. That's puffery. It's not going to happen. People would change doctors before they'd pay for that kind of service. What we're talking about really is part of the aftermath of the restraint budget of July of '83. The government came down as hard on the physicians as they did on anyone else a year and a half ago now. But the physicians managed to postpone all of the controversy, including that whole business around Bill 24, and they've been talking behind closed doors ever since. Now, the government has laid down some ultimatums, some very tough and in some respects some unreasonable ultimatums.
To the doctors?
To the doctors. One of the things they're going ahead on that I strongly oppose is this restriction of billing number nonsense. I think that's not going to work, and ultimately it will be tested in court if necessary. Another thing they've threatened but haven't done is to say we're going to set the budget for the Medical Services Commission every year. And if you guys don't find a way to live within it, then we'll tell you how you're going to live within it. We'll just change the amount we pay you every month. So at the end of the year, we've paid you whatever's in the budget.
Is
Now,
that unreasonable?
Yes, it is, because that rewards those who cheat. You see, if what you do is you take a system and you say there's a pot of money there, the first people that get it get all they can grab, and what's left over can be shared by those who are left. Anybody who flogs the fee-for-service system and bills unnecessarily or bills for things they don't do will get that money if they bill early in the year. Then they can go off to Hawaii while their colleagues work their backsides off at a lower fee later in the year. So
Right.
it's a stupid
In other
system.
words, that would become under a freeze of the amount of money put into the Medical Services Commission. That would become a sliding scale downwards per visit until the money was exhausted.
Right, which would reward those who cheat and cheat early and penalize those who are honest and work hard.
Are there any other
Okay.
options? Which
Now-
you were talking about
well,
what's going on behind closed doors.
And unfortunately, most of the physicians in the province, let alone you and I and the general public, we don't know what's really going on. Very little comes out. And the type of thing that comes out is this leaked letter that was sent out to some general practitioners. Now that letter represents the best good faith efforts, and I say that in all sincerity, of the BCMA to work with the government to control feed items that are suspected of abuse. What the BCMA is saying is, look you guys, there has been a 500% increase over the last 9 years on billing for this counseling service, a 1,000% increase in terms of number of dollars that are paid out. We really think that that's not justified, and those of you who might be flogging it a little too hard should cut it out. That's what they're saying.
I thought the letter pointed out that in 1974, there were 125,000 fee-for-services of the counselling type, which cost the scheme 1.6 million. But in 1983, there were 500,000 services which cost 19 million.
And in rough terms, that's a 500% increase on real terms, a 1,000% increase in dollar terms.
And does it mean, though, what is this counselling service? Have I had counselling service? I mean, I don't know.
You don't know. Your physician may or may not have billed for it, and that's the problem.
But I thought I just got billed for a visit.
You see, the intent is to provide through the piecework medicine system.
Fee-for-service.
Piecework,
You call it
fee-for-service,
piecework, yes,
some way of reimbursing physicians for doing legitimate medical counseling, particularly focused in areas where psychiatric services are necessary, but there's a shortage of psychiatrists, okay? However, it is interpreted more broadly than that. It is billed for, if you come in, Jack, and the physician says, well, Jack, you've lost some weight, but I'd like you to take off another 5 pounds. That could be interpreted as counseling, and that physician could bill $34.02. And 2 cents, I kid you not, for telling you that.
I wouldn't go to the doctor for that. If I go to the doctor, it's because I'm sick.
You may have gone for some other reason. You see, $17.54 is paid for an office visit. You cannot bill for both counseling and an office visit. But you can bill for the counseling, I believe it's 4 times a year. So if you're coming in regularly because you've been smoking too much, or you're hacking like crazy because you haven't given them up yet, could be that 4 of those times you come in during the year, I'll tell you, Jack, you've got to get off those cigarettes. And instead of billing through for $17.54, I'll bill through for $34.02.
You are clinically accurate in your interpretation. Are you correct in what you say?
It is something that is impossible to prove, because to design an audit technique to do it, it's not something I can go in and say your counsels are either there or you're not.
I'm not asking you to prove it.
In terms of the people that I speak to within the medical community, I firmly believe that it is abused in that manner.
All right, abused or not, the system is, if I go for an office visit, it costs the plan $17.54. If I go for an office visit, the GP may, without ever telling me...
Talk to you a little bit.
Talk to me a little bit.
Bill twice as much.
And legitimately bill twice as much.
And this should not be completely on the back of the physician. I don't want to come out in this interview as doctor bashing.
No.
It is a problem of the piecework system, and most of all, it is a problem of government policy. Because there's a legitimate need to fund preventive medicine services. Now the question is, should you do that by paying social workers and psychologists and nurses $20 an hour, or do you do it on a blank check piecework basis with doctors at $100 an hour? It's stupid government policy.
Except it would be almost impossible to change the system from the medical profession to the paramedical.
Well, let me suggest to you that the government's paying $19 million a year right now. Tomorrow they could say, in our next round of negotiations, we want to eliminate fee number 120 completely. Take it out. We're going to take 10 million of that 19 million and putting it into funding for public health centers, mental health centers, and provide more service for half the amount of money. Public saves 10 million on taxes, we all get more service, and we diversify, we break up this monopoly.
That's 10, 9, 19. More with David Schreck, Executive Director of the CU&C, after the break. This is fee for service number 120.
120. And it's a problem with fee for service that if more physicians were paid on salary, then as a salaried physician I could have a choice. I could have you come in a dozen times over the course of the year and maybe prescribe Valium for you to deal with your nerves and your smoking habit. Or I could see you maybe 3 or 4 times and talk to you and try to talk you out of smoking. But whichever way I did it, if I were on salary, would not affect my income. The physician could choose whatever the best health practice was, and the physician's choice of which way to treat your particular problem would not be affected by the piece rate that's paid for each of the different modalities.
But now you're on the Schreck Mount Pleasant Community Clinic operation.
Fantastic idea, Jack.
It is a good idea, and you've got 2 doctors working there now.
And we're adding the 3rd early in '85.
And you bought it $500,000 from your own CU&C, and you'll have that paid off in no time flat from the operations of the 3 doctors.
I wouldn't say in no time flat, but over 15 or 20 years.
You'll have it paid off. Now, don't want to lose sight of this particular thing. You are, of course, politically and, I suppose, culturally and economically opposed to fee-for-service.
I think that there is a better way. There's a time when fee-for-service works. If you have a shortage of doctors, fee-for-service is the best way to get them to work their backsides off and behave as if there are twice as many of them. We no longer have a shortage, we have a surplus. So we are using a payment system that makes the surplus worse. You add that to evidence that comes out of the United States where they show when you get rid of the piecework type of medicine and replace it with the salaried approach, you reduce hospital utilization by 40%.
Yeah, okay, I've got that.
There are a lot of benefits.
The other thing...
This whole fee number 120, this counseling business, demonstrates what is inherently wrong with piecework medicine. You can't control this. There's no way you can control it.
Let me give you another one. In the 10-year period from 71 to 81, the number of fees for service by doctors went up 88%, but the population only went up 26%. Now, is that the secret to the conundrum that the provincial government has, to cap the cost without capping the utilization?
And, well, that's the problem the provincial government's dealing with. As I pointed out, I think it is dealing with it in an antisocial manner, in a way that's going to exacerbate the problem, that it's going to screw things up, in short. But it has identified the problem correctly, and the problem is you can't control that kind of a piecework system when you have a surplus of physicians. And in fairness to the physicians, you know, many are using this counseling fee quite correctly. There is a need for those types of services. Government, in its wisdom, has chosen to allow a blank check at $50 to $100 an hour physicians to provide the services instead of looking at the whole paramedical range where it could do it at $20 an hour.
You see, the point is that the patient has no knowledge of what is being charged on his behalf.
And the interesting thing is there's not a very good way to give the patient that knowledge. I mean, everybody will talk about in the old days how you used to get a notice, you know, and the notice would say what the doctor did to you and what the plan was being billed for. But in a lot of cases, people can't understand what that notice really means.
Are you
Now,
suggesting that patients, or would you suggest that patients be told by the doctor, I'm now going to counsel you?
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if in the office the patients had to sign the billing card that went through to the Medical Services Commission. At least then...
Basically, we trust our doctors, don't we?
Oh, right. And it's...
I mean, I don't think there are many doctors making a racket
I think there are very few cases where the physician is blatantly abusing the system. I think there's a wide range of that's open for judgment and differing opinions. So two physicians could behave identically, as if they were clones of each other, as if they were twins, but their billing procedure could put them $50,000 or $100,000 a year apart in income.
Because there isn't a time when you go to the doctor when you're not counseled.
Well, no, just on how they interpret the rules on the fee schedule.
Now, I wouldn't like the system to cover it. In fact, the system does not cover people who go to the doctor and say, I feel fine, but I want a checkup. That is not covered, is it?
No, if they came in and said that,
they've got to pay privately. Is that not so?
That's not
an
an
insured service. Or if you want
service.
acupuncture in your ear from doctors who do it, you've got to go in and pay privately.
That's right.
But under this system, has there been an explosion of what, for the want of a better word, I'll call holistic medicine?
Well, that's one of the things that's suggested, but I think that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, that's really a side issue.
Because that's where the scheme gets 34 and 2 for the first, and then it drops to a patient visit, and the patient does get billed privately for the next visit.
I think you could probably count on your fingers and toes the number of practitioners.
That
like
certainly
in the
wouldn't account
province.
for $19 million.
No, I don't think so, Jack.
Now, let's look at this again. The crisis now faced by the medical profession in these behind closed doors negotiations.
The government is telling the medical profession that we're going to put a fixed amount of money into the pot, and we're going to come up with some way of limiting expenditures to that.
Are they justified?
Well, in comparison with international standards, we are very efficient, our health system, that we don't have any sort of cost crisis relative to the United States. In terms of the cost increasing more rapidly than the rate of inflation and then the population, yes, there's something to worry about. They have to look at better ways of doing the job.
They've got to cap it somehow, haven't
That's
they?
right. And the trick is to come up with a way of capping it that will maintain high-quality services to the public, diversify how medical practice is practiced, provide funding for preventive health care, and at the same time control those costs. And what I'm saying is that there are better ways of doing that than messing around with how you police piecework medicine. That you have to look at fundamental structural changes to how you do health care.
In fact, when you look at Fee 120, doctors may have been under-padding it, not over-padding it, if they are in fact entitled to double the rate for proper cuts.
Some probably do, and that's what's inequitable. If you and I were both doctors, we could do exactly the same thing to the same patient, and you might charge twice as much as
One
me.
last question. Does this indicate a desperation of the medical profession to cut down services, or are they trying to pressure somebody?
No, I think the letter indicates that the medical profession, the BCMA, is cooperating with the government to try to do something about the problem.
Keep me informed, will you, David Schreck, CU&C? Grateful for your presence this morning. I'll be back after the break. Ringing. If I hold on, I'll get a message.
In order to serve you, the operator will need to know your location.
That's bus information. Stu Hodgson kept his word. He put on 3 new operators for bus schedule information starting today from 6 to 9 operators. They have been losing 900 calls a day. The new transit schedules will be out today and posted in all the usual places. And the White Rock fare rate from 9:30 to 3 after 6 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays is 85 cents. Peak rush hour period is 125. And I shall be back tomorrow with God knows what at, I've got 3 seconds to waste, 9 a.m. precisely. A striking British coal miner on check at midnight. Ombudsman Friedman with Webster at 9 a.m. precisely.